Emily Carter wasn't just Jason Harwell's girlfriend. She was his worst nightmare wrapped in a smile. To everyone in Ledgeview Falls, she was the perfect partner, charming, supportive, beautiful. But behind the locked doors of their shared home, Emily was orchestrating something far more twisted. A web of seduction, blackmail, and ultimately, murder. By the time Jason discovered the truth, 6 men had already been pulled into her trap. One would never make it out alive. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a story of obsession, deception, and how a woman weaponized trust to ruin lives. Jason Harwell always believed he was a good judge of character. At 28, he lived a simple life in the quiet, forest-lined town of Ledgeview Falls, where neighbors still waved to one another, and most people left their front doors unlocked. He ran a small but successful carpentry business, working long hours in his garage-turned-workshop and occasionally taking on home renovation projects around town. His world was steady, calm, and routine, until he met Emily Carter. Emily arrived in Ledgeview Falls about a year before everything fell apart. She claimed she wanted a break from city life, having worked a stressful job in marketing in Chicago. With soft auburn hair, an easy smile, and the kind of laugh that lingered in your ears, Emily turned heads wherever she went. But she wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. People were drawn to her, especially Jason. They met at the local gym, both reaching for the same free weights. She cracked a joke, he laughed, and from there, it was instant chemistry. Within weeks, they were spending nearly every evening together. Emily seemed to be everything Jason had ever hoped for. She brought energy into his life, encouraged him to relax, and even helped him redecorate his small house. She loved wine, puzzles, cooking exotic meals, and had an obsession with true crime podcasts. Jason thought it was quirky, even cute. She seemed fascinated by human behavior, claiming it helped her understand people better. In public, Emily was affectionate and supportive. She showed up at Jason's work sites with lunch, posted photos of them on social media, and called him the love of her life in captions. His friends were impressed. Jason had always been quiet, even awkward around women. But now he was glowing, happy. He told his parents he was going to propose within the year. But slowly, subtle cracks began to show. Emily often talked about her past relationships, always in vague, shadowy ways. Most of her exes were toxic, she said, controlling or obsessive. Jason believed her. Why wouldn't he? She was so open about her life, or so he thought. She also seemed to have no close friends in town, though she was constantly texting or on the phone when Jason wasn't around. He didn't press. He didn't want to seem insecure. He trusted her. At first, the little lies didn't seem like lies. Emily would cancel plans last minute, claiming a migraine or a sudden family emergency. She would leave town on weekends to see her sister, who lived 2 hours away but never invited Jason along. Once, she said she was in bed all weekend with the flu, but Jason later noticed her social media had a check-in tag at a wine bar 2 counties over. When he asked, she shrugged it off. "It must have auto-tagged me," she said. He let it go. Still, the doubts lingered. One evening, Jason tried to surprise her by coming home early from a job site. Emily wasn't there. Her car was gone and the apartment looked untouched. When she came home 2 hours later, she was flushed and breathless, saying she had gone for a run in the park. Jason didn't mention the security camera at the park entrance, which he had checked. Her car hadn't been there. But again, he stayed quiet. People in love often ignore what's right in front of them. Jason was no different. He wanted so badly to believe that Emily was just eccentric, independent, mysterious in a romantic kind of way. He chalked up her odd behavior to past trauma or anxiety. He even convinced himself that her secrecy meant she was planning a surprise for him, maybe even a proposal. But behind the scenes, Emily was orchestrating something far more sinister. She kept a second phone in the glove compartment of her car, a device Jason never saw. On it, she maintained multiple dating profiles under different names. She used private browsers, encrypted chat apps, and routinely deleted her digital footprints. The Emily Jason knew was only one version of herself. In reality, she was balancing a web of relationships, each man believing they were her only love interest. She had a system, carefully timed meetings, excuses mapped out in her calendar, and locations tracked to avoid overlap. She was careful too. She changed her appearance slightly depending on who she was seeing. Different clothes, makeup styles, even accents. Some of the men she was involved with had no idea she lived with Jason. Others thought she was renting a room in a house with roommates. The lies piled up like kindling, each one just waiting to catch fire. To Jason, though, none of this was visible. He saw only what she allowed him to see. The dinners, the cuddles, the quiet nights watching movies. The I love yous that came so easily from her lips. He was under the illusion that his life had finally aligned, that the years of loneliness and failed dating attempts were behind him. In his mind, Emily was his reward for being patient, for staying kind in a harsh world. What Jason didn't realize was that the woman he thought he knew was a master manipulator. Emily wasn't just unfaithful, she was dangerous. Her true intentions wouldn't begin to surface until the night Jason discovered the camera footage hidden in the ceiling vent. But by then, the damage was done. The illusion was shattered, and Emily's carefully crafted world was only moments away from crumbling around her. Jason's discovery started with a feeling he couldn't shake. For weeks, a low-level anxiety had built up in his chest, humming quietly beneath the surface of his daily life. It wasn't a single moment that caused it, just a slow accumulation of odd behavior, unanswered questions, and that persistent gut feeling that something wasn't right. Emily had grown distant in small but noticeable ways. Her phone was always on silent. She kept it close, even taking it into the bathroom when she showered. If Jason glanced at the screen and saw a name he didn't recognize, she would explain it away with a casual, dismissive tone. One evening, Emily was in the shower and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Jason, already battling his suspicions, gave in and looked. A notification from an app he didn't recognize. Velma. The icon was unfamiliar. Jason quickly searched it and realized it was a disguised dating app designed to look like something innocent. His stomach twisted. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he decided to find out the truth for himself. He began by installing a hidden motion-activated camera in the corner of their living room, cleverly disguised inside an old alarm clock. It faced the entrance and part of the hallway that led to the bedroom. Jason felt guilty. Violating Emily's privacy like this made him feel sick, but he told himself it was the only way to be sure. Days passed, then a week. He reviewed the footage each night after Emily had fallen asleep, hoping, praying he would find nothing. What he found instead turned his world upside down. On the third day of footage, Jason watched as a man he didn't recognize entered their home while Jason was at work. Emily greeted him with a hug and a kiss. They disappeared into the bedroom for over an hour. The next day, a different man came, then another. Each time, Emily acted like it was completely normal. No signs of shame, no secrecy. She laughed with them, touched them affectionately. Jason couldn't even process what he was watching. Over the span of 7 days, Jason counted 5 different men visiting the house while he was away. Some were older, some younger. A few looked completely average, men who wouldn't draw attention walking down the street. One even wore a wedding ring. Jason watched it all unfold on his laptop in the garage, replaying the footage again and again. He wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding or a mistake. But there was no room for doubt. Emily had been sleeping with multiple men behind his back and doing it right in their shared home. But it wasn't just the betrayal that disturbed Jason. It was the organization of it all. The men never overlapped. Each one showed up at different times of day, sometimes with hours between them, as if she had planned it meticulously. She always made sure the house looked the same. No evidence left behind. Jason realized she wasn't just cheating. She was managing a network of secret relationships, all operating in perfect rhythm. Still in disbelief, Jason began searching for more signs. He dug into their shared computer and found a folder named Recipes Private. It required a password which he managed to guess based on her birthday. Inside were screenshots, chat logs, and photos. There were conversations with men using different names: Kate, Marissa, even Alyssa. Each identity had its own online dating profile, email address, and backstory. She tailored her behavior to each man's personality. With one, she was a struggling artist. With another, a recently divorced therapist. Jason uncovered fake Facebook profiles linked to these personas. On each, Emily had posted pictures that looked just real enough to be believable. Images borrowed from stock photography, old yearbook photos, or blurry selfies in unfamiliar places. He also found dozens of hotel receipts and rideshare logs paid in cash or under fake names. The sheer amount of planning overwhelmed him. This wasn't random or impulsive. Emily was running an operation. The final piece came when Jason stumbled upon a spreadsheet saved deep within a nested folder on her laptop. It was titled simply Schedule. On it were names, dates, and short notes, coded language that included references to locations, moods, and even physical preferences. Jason stared at the screen in silence, horrified. Each name had its own row. Some were marked with stars while others had exclamation points. One entry included a note. Possible risk. Asks too many questions. That man's name no longer appeared on later dates. Jason didn't know what that meant at first, but it chilled him to the core. Suddenly, everything about Emily made sense, and none of it was what he believed. She wasn't spontaneous. She wasn't unpredictable in a quirky way. She was methodical. Everything she had told Jason, her job in marketing, her sister 2 hours away, her late nights out, was part of a web of lies carefully crafted to protect her double life. And what terrified him more than the cheating was how calculated it all was. It wasn't about love or emotion, it was about control. Jason knew he had to act. He copied all the files to a flash drive, removed the hidden camera, and began gathering every piece of evidence he could find. But he also knew he had to be careful. Emily was smart. Too smart. If she found out he knew, there was no telling what she would do. So Jason kept quiet, pretending nothing had changed. He went to work like normal, smiled, kissed her goodnight, but everything had changed. The woman he loved was a stranger, and now Jason was living with someone capable of much more than betrayal, someone whose next move he couldn't predict. Jason didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the footage from the hidden camera playing on a loop in his mind. He kept picturing Emily's face, smiling, relaxed, acting like she hadn't turned their home into a revolving door of deception. During the day, he tried to act normal. He got up, showered, made coffee, and kissed her on the cheek like nothing was wrong. But his mind was racing with a single, overwhelming question: why? He needed answers. The cheating was one thing, horrible, but sadly not uncommon. But this wasn't casual infidelity. Emily had turned her life into a performance, each scene carefully directed and rehearsed. Jason couldn't stop wondering how deep it went. And then he remembered something strange he had noticed months earlier. A small, metal lockbox Emily kept in the closet. She had told him it contained tax documents and embarrassing journals from high school, brushing it off with a laugh. He had never thought much of it until now. When Emily went to a yoga class one evening, Jason made his move. The lockbox was heavier than he remembered. He pried it open with a flathead screwdriver, hands shaking, heart pounding in his chest. Inside, he found a tangle of USB flash drives, a black notebook, and a stack of Polaroid photos bundled with rubber bands. He pulled them out slowly, setting them on the bed like evidence from a crime scene. The flash drives were labeled with names. Some had first names, others initials, and a few were marked with dates. He plugged one into his laptop and opened the folder. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were video files, clear, high-resolution footage of Emily in bed with men he didn't recognize. But the angle of the footage wasn't handheld. It was shot from a fixed position as if a hidden camera had recorded it. Jason realized that Emily had been filming these encounters without the men's knowledge. One drive contained footage of a man nervously entering their home, clearly unaware of the camera capturing everything from behind a vent. Another folder had audio recordings, private conversations about marriages, jobs, secrets. Jason's hands trembled as he opened the black notebook. It read more like a ledger than a diary. Each page had a name, followed by financial information, salaries, employers, and even banking habits. There were notations in red ink like pays quickly, panic-prone, and emotional leverage, high. That's when Jason understood the full picture. Emily wasn't just having affairs, she was running an extortion ring. She had targeted men with something to lose, married professionals, public employees, businessmen. She would seduce them, secretly record their encounters, then send anonymous emails threatening to release the footage if they didn't pay. Jason flipped to the back of the notebook and saw a section labeled Payments. Next to each name were dollar amounts, dates, and notes like received via PayPal, cash drop successful, and stalling, escalate threat. He couldn't believe it. The woman he had planned to marry was exploiting people for money, weaving her affairs into a cold, methodical operation. This was more than a betrayal. It was criminal. He found one folder marked EB, a man in his mid-30s with thinning hair and a nervous expression. Jason clicked through photos of the man entering and leaving the house, screenshots of their text messages, and a document labeled Letter Draft. It was a pre-written threat, demanding $10,000 and promising to release compromising footage to his employer if he refused. Jason's stomach turned as he realized how many men must have been caught in this trap. And yet, they had all disappeared from Emily's life quietly, without alerting anyone. That's what scared him most. Why hadn't they gone to the police? Had Emily manipulated them into silence? Or was there something worse? He kept digging. In one folder, he found a scanned copy of a driver's license, and Evan Brooks, 36, from the nearby town of Linford. The same name appeared in the payment log, marked Initial Payment Made, Second Request Ignored. Unlike the other entries, this one had no follow-up, just a red question mark beside it. Jason tried searching for Evan Brooks online but found nothing recent. No social media activity, no job listing, just an obituary post made by a local newspaper 3 weeks earlier, calling him missing under suspicious circumstances. Jason's heart stopped. Emily had written a note about him. Possible risk. Asks too many questions. That was the same line from the spreadsheet he had found earlier. What had happened to Evan Brooks? Jason realized this wasn't something he could handle alone. He copied all the data onto another flash drive and contacted an attorney. The lawyer, upon seeing the evidence, immediately reached out to the authorities. A quiet investigation was launched to avoid tipping off Emily. They began reaching out to the men Jason had identified. Some were cooperative. Others were terrified of exposure and refused to talk. But the police confirmed something alarming. Evan Brooks had indeed vanished 3 weeks earlier, after telling a friend he was going to confront someone about being blackmailed. Jason couldn't shake the guilt. Evan had walked into the same house Jason lived in. He might have sat on the same couch, drank from the same glasses, and now he was gone. The police asked Jason to continue acting normal, to stay close to Emily and gather more information if possible. He agreed, though the fear never left him. Each night he lay beside her, unable to sleep, knowing that the woman next to him had crossed lines most people could never imagine. Emily Carter wasn't just unfaithful, she was dangerous, and Jason was living in the eye of the storm. Emily began to act differently, and Jason could feel it. Something in her movements had shifted, more alert, more guarded. She didn't leave her phone unattended anymore. She double-checked the locks before going to bed and started asking Jason questions about his schedule in ways she never had before. It was as if she sensed something closing in around her, though Jason never gave any indication that he knew. He continued pretending, playing the role of the doting boyfriend, while inside he was unraveling. The police investigation had been quiet, but even silence carries weight. Something was coming. He could feel it. Then one morning, Emily was gone. No note. No goodbye. Her car was gone, some clothes were missing, and her laptop had been wiped clean. Jason came home from running errands and found her side of the closet empty. She hadn't even taken all of her things, just the essentials. It was a clean break, sudden and calculated. Jason's blood ran cold. He contacted the detective on the case, who confirmed what he feared. Emily had vanished. That same day, news came in from Linford, the neighboring town. A hiker had reported a strange odor coming from behind an old rental cabin deep in the woods. The property had been abandoned for several weeks. The authorities went in with cadaver dogs and uncovered a shallow grave. Inside, they found the body of a man, partially decomposed, wrapped in a blue tarp. Nearby, in a garbage bin at the edge of the property, they found personal belongings: a cracked cell phone, a wallet with ID, and a duffel bag containing men's clothes. The ID matched the name Jason had seen in Emily's files, Evan Brooks. Forensic analysis confirmed it. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Time of death: approximately 3 weeks prior, just days after Evan had last contacted his friend, saying he planned to meet someone who had been threatening him. Jason's world tilted. Evan hadn't just been extorted, he'd been murdered. The cabin had been rented under a false name, but security footage from a nearby gas station caught a woman matching Emily Odd's description, filling up a car at a pump just miles from the cabin, on the day Evan was believed to have been killed. In the footage, she wore sunglasses and a hat, but her posture, her face. Jason recognized her instantly. It was enough for the authorities to issue a nationwide warrant for her arrest. As the case hit the media, Emily's story unraveled further. More men came forward, some driven by fear, others by guilt. A few had paid her large sums of money, and several admitted they had been too embarrassed to speak out. One man, a married school principal, said he had been on the brink of suicide after receiving her threats. Another had relocated out of state, thinking he could escape the blackmail. None of them had any idea what Emily was really capable of. Investigators uncovered more rental properties tied to fake identities. In one, they found a storage unit filled with labeled folders, burner phones, wigs, and credit card receipts. Emily had created an entire underground system to manage her schemes. It was organized, obsessive. Every detail had been accounted for. She hadn't just been manipulating people. She'd been building a life on lies and using her victims to fund it. But the question remained: where was she? For weeks there were no leads. Then a break came from an unlikely place: a yoga instructor in New Mexico. She recognized Emily from a news segment and remembered her attending 3 classes under the name Nora. The instructor called the tip line, and federal agents were dispatched to the small desert town of Arroyo Vista. Emily was found renting a room under yet another fake name, working part-time at a bookstore and blending in like she always had. She didn't resist arrest. She was calm, polite, and eerily composed. Her trial was a media sensation. Prosecutors laid out the full extent of her crimes: illegal surveillance, identity fraud, extortion, and the murder of Evan Brooks. They presented the videos, the ledger, the threats, and the mountain of digital evidence Jason had collected. The jury watched as the perfect image of Emily Carter dissolved into something far colder. A woman who had used charm and beauty as tools to control, manipulate, and destroy. Her defense claimed Evan's death was accidental. They said he had attacked her, and she had fought back in self-defense. But the evidence said otherwise. The angle of the injury, the tarp, the remote location, all of it pointed to a planned killing. She had taken her time, cleaned up, disappeared, and then moved on like nothing had happened. The verdict was swift: guilty on all counts. Emily Carter was sentenced to 35 years in prison with no chance of parole for the first 28. In the courtroom, she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She sat quietly, almost detached, as if she were watching someone else's story unfold. Jason didn't attend the sentencing. He had already moved out of Ledgeview Falls, trying to start over in a town where no one knew his name or what he had lived through. For a while, he couldn't sleep in a room without checking the corners for hidden cameras. He never looked at people the same way again. The woman he had once thought was his soulmate had turned their life into a stage for deception, extortion, and murder. What had begun as a love story ended with a grave in the woods and a man waking up from a nightmare he never saw coming. The story could have ended with the trial. For most people, that would have been enough. Justice was served, the criminal locked away, and the public given a name and face to fit their unease. But for Jason Harwell, the nightmare didn't end with the sound of a gavel or the closing of a courtroom door. The aftershocks of what Emily Carter had done followed him into every corner of his life. After Emily's sentencing, Jason sold the house they had shared. He couldn't stand being in it anymore. Every room felt contaminated, like the walls had soaked in the lies. The bedroom where she whispered promises. The kitchen where they cooked dinner side by side. The hallway where hidden cameras had captured strangers coming and going. He packed what little he could bear to keep, and moved several states away to a quiet coastal town where no one recognized his face. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted to disappear, the same way Emily had, but for very different reasons. He started working for a small construction company, keeping to himself, avoiding questions. Most people there knew only that he was quiet and polite, and that he never talked about his past. But Jason hadn't escaped everything. At night, the memories returned. Not just the betrayal, but the weight of it all. How close he had come to danger without realizing it. He replayed every conversation, every moment when something had felt off, and wondered how he could have missed what was right in front of him. Months passed. Jason tried therapy, tried journaling, tried long walks by the ocean. He thought, little by little, that maybe life would return to something like normal. But then one afternoon a man showed up at his work site, well-dressed, mid-40s, and carrying a briefcase. He said his name was Cole Hartman, and he worked for a private investigations firm based in Chicago. He wasn't with the police, he said, but had been hired by an anonymous client to dig into Emily Carter's past. Jason didn't want to talk. He told the man to leave. But Cole left behind a business card and a simple message: "There is more you done to know." For days, Jason debated whether to call. He had promised himself to leave it all behind. But curiosity has a way of festering, especially when it's tied to trauma. Eventually, he dialed the number. What Cole revealed shook Jason to the core. According to his investigation, Emily Carter wasn't Emily Carter at all. Her real name was Amelia Drew. She had legally changed it twice in the past 10 years, along with her social security number, through obscure identity loopholes tied to distant relatives and outdated records. She had used at least 7 different aliases across 4 states, all tied to similar patterns of behavior: short-term relationships, fake business ventures, and sudden disappearances after large sums of money went missing. In one case, a man had taken out a loan to help her start a wellness brand, only to never hear from her again. In another, a woman, yes, a woman, claimed Amelia had seduced her under a false name, manipulated her emotionally, and drained her bank account. None of these people had ever seen her face on the news during her trial. Why? Because Emily, or Amelia, had always known when to vanish, changing just enough to stay ahead of the consequences. Cole suspected that Evan Brooks wasn't her only victim to end up dead. He shared a case from Arizona, where a man had gone missing under circumstances disturbingly similar to Evan's. He recently confided in a friend about a woman he was involved with who had started making threats. The investigation had gone nowhere. The woman he described didn't exist on paper. Jason asked the only question that mattered: how could someone live like that and never be caught? Cole's answer was chilling. Most predators don't need to hide in the shadows. They live in plain sight. They smile, they charm, they blend, and society often protects them by refusing to believe what's possible. Emily had relied on the world underestimating her. That's what made her so dangerous. Despite her conviction, questions remained unanswered. Where had all the money gone? Who had helped her create so many false identities? Was someone else involved? Someone still out there? Authorities were still sifting through evidence, tracing bank accounts, following loose threads. But the trail was cold. Jason didn't want to follow it anymore. He thanked Cole, deleted his number, and chose once again to walk away. In the end, what haunted Jason most wasn't the betrayal, the lies, or even the murder. It was the realization that a person could look you in the eye every day, sleep beside you, smile at your parents, and still be capable of unspeakable things. He had loved someone who saw people not as partners but as pawns, and for a time, he had been one of them. He now lived quietly. No social media, no dating. He focused on work, on small routines. He still checked his locks twice each night. Still looked over his shoulder in parking lots, but he survived. And in a way, that survival was the one thing Emily, or Amelia, hadn't planned for. The woman who had seduced, deceived, and destroyed the lives of so many was now behind bars. But her true identity, her true motives, might never be fully understood. And Jason Harwell, the man who thought he had found love, became the one who finally exposed her for who she really was. Not a girlfriend, not a victim of circumstance, but a predator in plain sight.